The Act 250 permit amendment application 4C0436-32C for a proposed project involving the bike trails at Bolton Valley Resort, namely the request to increase the hours of operation and increase the season during which the trails may operate for entire days. June 4th, we are the District 4 Environmental Commission, meeting in Richmond, Vermont. Application was filed by VVR LLC, seeking approval to extend the use of the previously permitted mountain bike trails to operate full weeks in early and late season, Memorial Day through October, and this will extend daily operating hours. I'm Tom Little, the chair of the District 4 Commission. Belburn, my commission members with me here are Monique Gilbert of Heinsberg and Pamela Loranger of Colchester, Caitlin Hayes, the coordinator managing the application. We have assistance from another District 4 coordinator, Stephanie Monahan, for the new live video technology that the state has us using these days. And as part of the open meeting law changes that went into effect a while back, I have some information to share about that. We're providing and confirming that we have taken the following steps. We are providing public access to this hearing by online video conference with additional access offered through telephone. We are using the Microsoft Teams platform for this hybrid meeting. All members of the commission are here in person today, but others have access to contemporaneously listen and, if desire, participate by attending in person, downloading the Microsoft Teams application, or by calling into the toll-free number that we provided in the meeting notice. We have also provided public notice of instructions for accessing the meeting. We previously gave public notice of the necessary information for accessing the meeting, including how to access it using telephone or Microsoft Teams, all in the meeting notice. That document with those instructions has also been provided in the meeting notice on the Act 250 database online. Do we have anyone on Teams?
Yeah.
No, we do not. Okay. This, as I've indicated, this meeting is subject to the Vermont open meeting laws. By participating, you are consenting to being audio-visually recorded, and for that recording to be published on the board's online database and their YouTube channel. Any written information or exhibits provided to us or to the Act 250 staff regarding official state business are considered public records and will become part of the permanent record to be published on the board's online database. For anyone who comes online, the chat function has been disabled for this meeting. I think I'm going to talk about muting to avoid us hearing barking dogs. You don't have anything online. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand, and I will recognize you. And I will be asking everyone here give everyone here an opportunity to speak on the questions and issues in front of you. When you do speak, please state your name and, if relevant, your street address, so we know where your property is located. I think we have seen some of you all before. We were up in Bolton not too long ago on a different application. Speak through the people who have signed in. I'm very pleased with the general quality of the handwriting. Walter Duda, 127 Wentworth. Andrew. Adam. Andrew. Last name? Crowder. 207 Wentworth. Claire Rock from the applicant. Stephen Diglio, civil engineer, 183 Thatcher Road. Lindsay Laurier, the applicant. Jake O'Neill, from the applicant. Megan Murphy, and a joiner at 207 Wentworth Road. Michael Stick, for the Land Use Review Board. Is there anyone I missed? Okay. And we still don't have anyone remotely, so.
We still do
Okay.
not.
And then one of the reasons for asking for your mailing address and email address is that there will be information coming out from the commission and the staff coordinators after this hearing. And if we can't read your mail address or email address, we will have a hard time doing that. And likewise, we will be giving parties an opportunity to file additional materials to follow up the meeting. Conflicts of interest. Each of us on the commission panel has reviewed all of the materials submitted to the application and party status written requests with an eye towards identifying any conflicts of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest that any of us might have. Each of us has done that analysis. We are not aware of any conflicts of interest that need to be disclosed at this time. If there's anyone here with us today who thinks that they are aware of a conflict of interest or the appearance of one, please speak now. Okay? We have reviewed all of the materials submitted with the application. It says the event to the site. Going forward, another sort of post-hearing point to make is that everyone that communicates with the commission and the coordinators, all that must go through Caitlin Hayes, our district coordinator, and not through other parties or directly to us. I'm now going to ask anyone who thinks that they might address the commission during the hearing to swear or affirm that they will tell the truth. Accordingly, anyone who expects to address us, please raise your right hand. And do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony or evidence that you shall provide relative to the consideration of this application shall be truthful, accurate, and complete under the pains and penalty of perjury? If so, please answer, I do. In a few minutes, the applicant will give us an overview of what is being applied for. But first, I'd like to make a comment on party status and the process for participating. There are three major categories through which someone may participate in an Act 250 hearing. First, the legislature has determined that certain persons or governmental entities have a right under our statutes to participate. We call these versus parties by right or statutory party. State of Vermont and all of its agencies, towns, select boards, municipal planning commissions, and the regional planning commission are parties that way, parties by right. Second, any person may also be admitted as a party if they can show a particular interest, unique relatively to them, that may be affected by the project, and demonstrate that their interest is related to one or more of the Act 250 criteria. Those who are admitted as parties will have the right to testify, ask questions of other witnesses, and the right to appeal our decision. Last, if you do not qualify as a party, we also allow people to participate as a friend of the commission, which means if you are able to offer us certain information that we might not otherwise know about, you may be an attorney, an engineer, or a scientist with specialized knowledge, or you may just not be interested in becoming a party. We will allow you to speak, you just don't have those other procedural rights. And we don't require you to seek party status or friend of the commission status. Some neighbors simply want to listen and become more informed about the project. All are welcome here, hearing them. Now, our responsibility under Act 250 is to collect evidence as to whether this project, the proposed project, meets the requirements of Act 250. And then based on the evidence, decide either to issue a permit with or without conditions, or deny a permit. We gather the evidence in order to make an informed decision. This hearing is a key part of that process, collecting evidence. Party status, as I've indicated, is decided on an issue-by-issue basis or a criterion basis. Act 250 is organized around 10 criteria and 22 sub-criteria. So when your turn comes, please identify yourself, where your property is located, and try to identify each criterion under which you believe the project will adversely impact or affect you or your property. I don't know if we passed out the criterion. Do we have copies of that? Sometimes we have maybe you're familiar with them. These are air pollution, water pollution, traffic, highway safety, aesthetics, wildlife impacts, primary agricultural soils, stormwater, town plan, regional plan, historic sites, and people. So, but when we get to your turn, we'll ask you to say who you are, where you live, where your property is, and how what's proposed by this project, the expansion of the hours and days, will have an adverse impact on your property, your enjoyment, use of it. Any questions about any of that?
Does anyone want the criterion handout? We do have it if anyone is interested.
Okay. So, for the record, we visited the site earlier today where we looked at the site plan, walked around some of the property. We did not walk around every acre of the applicant's property, 846.96 acres. We did not make any recording at the site visit, but we did, we're transported up to the top of the main lift, walked around up there, down some of the ski trails, looked down at some of the bicycle trails. We looked at many water bars, other infrastructure that's there to help manage stormwater runoff and other types of runoff. We looked at some areas that are in the process of being conserved and will no longer be used as trails. We then went down and over to the trail that's under work being done on a ski trail that runs down behind the Wentworth, or some of the Wentworth properties, where we met with residents of those properties who pointed out to us areas where there is, has been, and continue to be significant surface runoff affecting their properties. Black lives were do that. So this is the point where we ask the applicant to present a general overview of the project in brief, keeping in mind that we've read the application and the exhibit and we've been to the site. And briefly explain how the project addresses the Act 250 criteria, except the ones that we believe are, we want you to address the ones that are not contested now. So if you can do that, we would appreciate that. And then I'm going to ask, I understand if it was due to the schedule, he has to leave pretty soon. So we're going to ask for his testimony then. So the applicant, you have the floor to give us a general overview.
Okay. This application is an amendment. It's very limited in scope. We are asking to, when the original permit was granted, there were restrictions on our hours. If you can remember back, during that process, I think you had asked, what do you think your hours of operation will be? And we had never run a bike park before. And we said, we think we're gonna start with this and we'll see, you know. And what we said at that time was that we would run 3 days a week through June, and then 3 days a week again at the end of the season, after Labor Day. And we had shared that we were thinking of doing, you know, noon to 8 on the midweek to try to have some after work traffic while the daylight hours allow for it, and then 10 to 6 or 10 to 7 or something like that. We didn't know honestly at the time that that was going to be codified. It was.
Interrupt you just for a moment. Is it possible to put a site plan on the
Yes.
screen? So we have that for reference.
It was really just our first best guess at what the hours might be for a bike park. So I think, what we're asking for at this point is just, to more lenience in terms of the operating hours. The ability to set our operating hours during the bike season is what we're asking for. So these have limitations on, like I said, 3 days a week in the early season. It also references the hours of operation. We would just like to have discretion to, you know, to set our operating hours moving forward during the season, without needing to, you know, come back for an amendment each time we want to make a change to our operating. No construction proposed, no changes to anything in terms of the trails proposed. When we reached out to A&R, they said they have no comment because there's no change and they had no concerns around any, you know, change to the operating hours. Is there any other time? Was there any besides less? No, and so I think, you know, like in that earlier hearing, yeah, I think if we had known that to be honest, I didn't anticipate there would be a restriction on operating hours because we don't have that in the winter. And so it never occurred to me, so we just shared with you what in year one, we thought we would give a try. And, you know, what we're finding is there's a lot of interest during foliage season, for example. And, you know, we want to, where there's demand, obviously, the job of the business is to meet demand. We have summer camps. I mean, these are just some of the reasons why. We have summer camps that start right when school lets out. So the 3-day-a-week operation is tough because we really want to get the kids on the lift. They're, you know, right now we can't start the mountain bike camps till a couple weeks after school stops because of this limitation. So for us, it's really just some minor tweaks, just some practicality elements, but, you know, no changes to anything with regard to, the trails themselves or anything like that. No proposed construction at all, just operating hours. And we're just looking for flexibility to be able to adjust as, you know, to adjust the business. We're not requesting a change to the season, although I will just say that May 15th will never open early. So, you know, we put in the application Memorial Day, that's the earliest we would ever realistically.
We'll go into that in more detail. If that's good. Thanks for the overview. I think what we read and what we saw. Mr. Duda, you have before, if you'd like to give us your commentary and concerns. We have your written party status petition, and I guess if you could start out by maybe elaborating on that a bit and give us your request for the criteria that you would like to be considered a party under.
Yes, yes, thank you. I want to tell you folks, if we're leaving the rules, it's clear you're leaving the rules. I have a lot of faith in them. So it's really cool for me to speak here, no matter what happens. I will feel heard and know that it's stayed with me. So my first concern is water, and I'm going to look through the water. Just, there's a lot of context that I must include. I don't want to be lying. So one resort was owned by a different party. That party dug a drainage ditch along the boundary Snowflake Family Trail and buffer zone. What happened was this person brought it down, and just beyond our house, there was a property that was vacant, and I believe at the time owned by someone from out of state. So that person was never here. So what that the owner at that time did was they dipped the drainage ditch so it dumped on somebody's property other than the ski area. Now, recently, that property is now owned by the applicant's organization. And I'm concerned that since it's been subdivided, that the applicant wants to develop that land, what's going to happen to the water? So
Might be, I might just.
Can you blow that up?
Do you want to see that? Because I don't think the property that Mr. Duda is referring to is on that map. Do you want to see that, or you want me to zoom in on
I
that?
want to see Duda's property for that area.
yeah, it's off Lower Bentley Trail, and it's the last. Our property is the next to last property above the condos on Langwood. So,
Are you saying?
right there.
I have a problem not anymore. I think we can one.
Which one of those is your?
It would be. So there's condos. It's
Here, I can bring up parcel viewers. Actually.
yeah, it's I believe you showed our house at that point at the top of the screen. Because there was the condos, there was that vacant spot, and then there was a house.
That is-
151, no, 127, so it would be there. We have a green roof, so good luck seeing it in the trees. Okay,
So what I'm gonna ask you to do, Judith, is tell us about, this is kind of a tricky way to frame this, but, one way to frame it is that we're trying to understand if the expanding the number of days and the hours of the days
and I understand.
by itself is going to make the situation worse for you. There may be a question about the applicant's compliance with the existing permit, stormwater permit, runoff and all that. We're not, we don't get paid to do that so much. We're not the enforcement team. But, maybe just describe what you see happening next on your property.
Okay, I think I know how to do this. I'll do the best I can.
Thanks.
Okay, so here's what we got. The average rainfall in June, in Bolton, Vermont is about 5 inches. Right now, the land is soaked. The other day we had a 2-inch storm, not a big deal, except, water is flowing down fiercely right now, and I can see places that you guys didn't go down and look at where the trail was blown out, and because water came rushing down, and an average, like an average June storm happens all the time. So what this meant was there. I'm going to have to mix my different criteria here because I got to do this. So what happened was, right now, the land on Lower Bentley Trail is to the, guys not an inch, but to my eye is saturated. We got 5 inches of rain coming, stuff flew out. There was, I could hear heavy equipment, a tracked vehicle up on the trail after the storm. Also, a tracked vehicle that I'm pretty sure is the applicant's tracked vehicle was going up and down our road. Our road is in horrible shape. Tracked vehicles, pretty heavy, and also they grade the road. So now I'm talking about 1 and 4 at the same time. That tracked vehicle was also on the trail at a time when things are really wet, which means that increases the likelihood of more erosion because we're expanding the time when the trail can be used into a very wet period up where we live. And frankly, I'm not even sure snow like Bentley dries out anymore. It used to Lower Bentley, but not so much. So, so going up with heavy equipment, working on the trail, got people beating on the trails because it's wet and it's raining. The trails will need to be groomed, for want of a better way to describe it, because we're starting early during a wet season. So got equipment going up, beating up the mountain. Also, the way that, and the erosion in other places affects us because what the applicant has done is taken water, concentrated it, driven it toward Wentworth, and literally, we have, during the worst of the storms, we have water that comes down, drains down a trail with a double fall line, hits a drainage berm, and points directly at our backyard. The real issue here, I mean, beyond the compliance stuff, which I think is a huge deal, beyond that, because it's going to be a wet time, the trail activity is going to require maintenance that's going to further damage the place. So if we start early, we're starting in the wet season on a saturated patch of land on the other side of the trail. Now, this may or may not be germane, but for some reason, the town has chosen to not regulate this at all. And also, even if it did, one of the main, experts on this stuff, who's on the development review board now works for the organization. And so therefore, this person, under Vermont's ethics law, can't really address this because it would be a clear conflict of interest. And so we're coming to you for help. Wet season, a lot of runoff, a lot of activity to keep trails up to snuff so that folks can make money off them. And it just will increase the likelihood that the already unreasonable erosion will get worse, and that the already ridiculous amounts of water coming onto our land will increase. I guess that's it. Oh, and also, and it's all tied in. The aesthetics thing is, you probably saw a lot of standing water. Well, it's like mosquitoes and if we allow these folks to do this earlier, it will further degrade the roads, because I don't know, we did not have that kind of water with steep trails started. And yeah, I'm not an expert. I can only tell you what I've seen and living up there. So that's what I got. Thank you. And I did say I want to be a part of this. I can send you some pictures of the city.
Can you, say a little bit more about your criterion 7 request, which is burden on municipal services? So the town of Bolton cannot keep our roads to a standard now. How would the proposed change in hours or days worsen that problem?
Everything is about water. Everything that I'm talking about ultimately is about water. Except, well, yeah, and indirectly. So as I told you, after this big rainfall, heavy equipment that I'm pretty sure was owned by Oak Valley, was moving up and down, Wentworth Road because, the applicant, does not offload their vehicle. They just drive them up and down the road. That tracked vehicle, as they, through the wet season, as they drive their tracked vehicles up and down our road, because they gotta keep the thing together, they're degrading the road. My poor neighbor, Jeff Dow, has a big rent in his driveway, and if it's not repaired very soon, it will take out a section of the road there.
Thank you. No, not yet. Okay, not yet. We're ready. And Mr. Duda, do you have, you mentioned in your testimony, you have some stuff, paperwork or resources that you want to share with us? Yeah. Yeah, something you can do that.
I have something, but as I thought about it, I will send this to Caitlin. I want to work on it a little bit more, because I realized that, there's a couple of
And tell us, give us a few examples of what happens on your property when there's a big rainstorm.
Well,
We've had some of those in May.
there's rumors, and we may have a couple more.
What happens to your property? What does it look like?
Okay, so one of the things that happens, we live on lake. So one of the things that happens is, water's being forced to drain, towards our place. And we live on ledge. There's a little piece of ledge that sticks out in our basement. When we first moved up there, it was just a tiny pool. And nowadays, what we do is we put a dehumidifier down there, and now and then we get out our wet dry vacuum. We now have roots exposed on trees, that we did not have. We've worked hard to divert our water so that we can get it into drainage and away from our property and our neighbor's property, because we don't want to beat on our neighbors either. That's we've had increased water flow, we've had increased driveway damage, we put down stay mat, which is pretty good stuff. We have water in our basement, we have trees that, have now had exposed, roots that did not have them. We have wet spots that don't, easily go away. And, you know, folks might try to say it's just the weather and has nothing to do with anything, but I don't believe.
That, those impacts, when did those impacts start noticing?
It's been just the last few years, and it seems to be getting worse. And I will, be fair, I'll exclude the monster storm that we had left road, last year. But it seems to be increasing. Again, I'm not an expert, I don't measure. All I see is that, I learned this is pretty as it used to be. My neighborhood isn't as pretty as it used to be. So the aesthetics, there is silt that's coming down from, it appears that it's coming, well, now I can see the ditches on the back.
Do you attribute that, it's not an easy one to ask or answer, but do you attribute that to an increase in precipitation? Or can you attribute it to the building of the bike trail?
No.
And if so, how do you make those connections?
I can only answer your question this way, sir. Before the bike trails came in, there were not kind of semi-impervious raceways for bike trails, bringing water down. And there were not culverts and ditches and little mosquito harvesting pools that were all pointing towards our properties and on a double plow line. I have a photograph. I'm going to send you some stuff in the spring, whether it's germane or not, that will show you that water is coming out of this tiny retaining pool and down the far side of the ski trail or Bentley Trail, hitting a drainage berm and that points literally at our backyard. And yes, there is a drainage ditch on the side, but it doesn't seem to, it doesn't stop anywhere near the amount of water I would like it to, and it's not maintained, and I get those are compliance issues. But I really don't want to see more activity during a wet month of the year that's going to cause folks to tinker with how they drain their water even more. And I can't speak to that. I can say one of the things. I can't speak to how they're dealing with water. As I said, it's unregulated by our town for some reason I don't understand. And there is no oversight, as far as I know, when the applicant builds drainage features to protect the trails. And I know that they have a consulting engineer, but after all, consultants recommend they don't enforce. Our property is, I'm gonna read this. When I was a kid, my mom was on food stamps. Things were that rough. And very lucky was my wealth is my home. Now I'm staying employed, if you have, and I've been able to save some money. But my house is the majority of my wealth. And to allow if you allow this, then you will also be allowing a lot of activity on the mountain. One of our DOPRB engineers said, I shouldn't be using heavy equipment on the mountain, and if you do, it should be regulated. Nobody's regulating this, and I'm very concerned about this. And, maybe I would say one other thing, and I will really stop. I'd be willing if, I'd drop my party status in a minute if there were conditions that the applicant took their water and put it on their land and kept it away from their neighbors' homes. Now, I could go away on this. Easy. But I don't believe, because this is not about protecting people, it's about making. And that's fine, it's a good thing, I mean, this is.
So, in order to keep the flow just going, considering that we will be departing, to do that, I'm going to give the applicant a chance, if the applicant wants to ask, to do that, any questions we may have. You can speak to his issues and his testimony a bit later when you make your full presentation, but if you have any questions for Mr. Duda, now will be the time to ask him. I think we're going to continue with the party status requests. We have a party status request that the Christine Schuyler, John Chernenko filed in writing a few days ago for status under criterion 4. And we will probably take a break in a few minutes and make some preliminary rulings on party status. Our practice is to make those rulings at the beginning of the hearing so we know who the parties are. And then once we've heard all of the evidence, we may revise those decisions after we've heard all of the evidence. Now, Andrew, 207 Wentworth, do you wish to see party status?
I know,
Excuse me?
I don't,
Okay, we'll give you that chance. Megan Murphy. Morning, good afternoon. What is it? Would you like to be considered a party, and on which criteria?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're for an 8. It was soil erosion.
Criterion 4 is erosion and capacity of the soil to hold water.
Yeah.
That is, where is your property on the picture there?
right there, other persons, it's over.
Okay. And what you can tell us about the impacts that you've seen on your property by reference to what Mr. Duda said. You can say the same thing for me, or you can say expand on that. Or is the, in general, is the flow of
I think a lot of my conclusion on it is.
And what have you observed in terms of the behavior of the runoff over the last 6 years? So,
So I guess what I'll say is, when I started around 2018, that's when we did a bunch of work on our container. And I think that's relevant. So I think it was 2018 that, we updated the agreement. So we pulled all of the illuminated features out, doing our training, and that, at that time, I think it was probably, I think our purchase for, the Gloria family, the ownership, in 17, or something, right? And so shortly after the conversion, we had no idea what so all of our work was based on the current scale thing, which essentially meant that we were basing more on, like, right? That was at that time when we were doing heat flow. That's changed dramatically. We've seen, so for us, it's been a really clear difference in 2022. We're not going to bring it out. Our drainage system work fast and beautifully, actually installed, and we worked with our engineer and, our the crew, to kind of iterate on that. So we did the work, we actually had them come back and sort of like redo some of the work in areas where it wasn't working properly, at a later point in that season. So I feel like we were pretty rigorous with that. Really worked quite beautifully. And still, we see degradation coming from 20% kind of dropping in. It wasn't terrible initially. The worst of it, I would say, that I have seen in our yard, we've only been doing for ago on the 31st. It wasn't even the bigger storm really. It was like this past Saturday, it was that full notice to storm. And we now have the ground is fully saturated. We're getting cooling. The bottom of the flesh, bubbled through, cooled, poured down. Everything's so saturated that it's giving firm strength in the area and the perimeter. And it's actually pushing water in our basement now, and that's something that we had not seen in the past. We've had it on and off over the last year with big storms. We've seen that kind of saturation, but it has not been a regular occurrence. Pretty concerning because we've invested a lot in our property, and that's also noted, like, that's also a big part of our work. We love doing this, we care about it, and it feels really, really inconsiderate to be given this messaging. Like, water just flows by and it's not about true. The advice I'm now receiving is you're gonna need second grade wood, it's not gonna address everything. It's not exactly, like some of it surface water, surface fine, but something under the ledge, it's really hard to stop it up there. I've been told that second grade is gonna help, and it's not gonna help. We do have over point directed our property, that's a little bit concerning. We have the drainage just so, and I can show you some images, but, the one portion of there's, as you noted, when we're up there, there are ditches on both sides of the trail. On for the upper part of the trail, the water goes on the back side, and then at our property, it shoots directly across and goes right behind our property, freaking saturating coming through that berm. Not to mention the force of the water crossing over. I wrote in my form, and I detailed this, and talked about the water in the lines or, in later that one, but, I really would like to see the ditch on our side, water property line, would not be the primary. It's right there, and there's no savior for us. We're already like at capacity, like most of the time now. Which is really concerning to me, and as Walter noted, like, we get a lot of rain early season. I'm less concerned about late season. It's fine. But we tend to have like water events in now, May, June, July. My observation has been that the applicant's priority is resolving issues with the trail, not the way the water's running, right? And I can talk more about this as well, but their trail throughout in one section, we that, May 17th storm, so that was the largest, like, that was the largest big ago. They went ahead and upsized the culvert, and that's actually the trail, but they didn't address any of the culverts coming from. There was no other upsizing, there was no cleaning the channels, it was literally that single culvert going underneath the trail for a while. So good news, the trail will now be safe, but doesn't mean my property is off. That is good, so that was my first criteria, the second, and, you know, so I think like Walter noted though, I'm more concerned with early season than late season, expanded hours, but the bottom line is that, you know, like overall, I'm just concerned with my property and, you know, what this all means for them. Very, very disappointed also that the way that this has been addressed by, you know, BDR engineer, et cetera, is like, well, you know, water flows downhill, sorry. Even though they looked enough like a bunch of, you know, there's more for resurface, there's money can't even, you know, like water corrected us.
Yeah.
And it's really frustrating to get that messaging, you know, that it's essentially the messaging of, well, you know, the more that you live here, we don't care.
That's what we needed to hear for at least the parties that has a piece of this. We're going to take a break. We're going to, it's going to be easy for us to leave and review. So we'll take maybe a 5-minute or 10-minute break and then we resume. And We're back on the rec board. We've made, discussed the party status request, and we're making the preliminary determinations for the party, people requesting party status, and that is to preliminarily grant party status for the purposes of testimony at this hearing on criteria 1 and 4. And Mr. Duda and for Mr. Murphy. I'm wondering if someone can show us on some map or site plan where the bike trails are that are the closest ones to the Wentworth subdivision. How close are some of the trails to Wentworth? There are,
You look up communications areas.
Okay, is that a better?
Yeah, that'll show the way to lead where.
It's like 38.
These are.
while we're doing this, I'm trying to get a sense of the
Well, wait, no, go back to that.
Yeah, you had-
It's right up there.
cause and effect,
Yeah, it shows it right there.
Yeah.
cause and effect potential for,
Okay, this is the trail, Jake, the green?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so this is the trail. And which is your guys' house, Andy and Megan? Is it this,
No, that's John's.
the red one? Oh, I thought your roof was silver. Okay, okay. So this is their house, and then the Duda's house, and so between the trail and their house is just the forest. So you guys saw it, their house is right on the trail.
the trail is, in what color is the trail?
This green is the bike trail. It's also the same ski trail. So the bike trail in this portion just runs along the existing,
Yeah, the hash line there.
yeah, the hatch line. So this white, it just runs right along this white ski trail that you can see. And their house is right on the ski trail. And then the bike trail curves away and kind of goes away. And then there's a ski trail. There's some woods here. And then there's an open slope ski trail here, which is natural. There's full growth. You know, it's not, there's no work roads or there's nothing on it. And then this is the Duda's house. So the Duda's house backs up to this other ski trail. And then there's a forest block and then there's the trail. And these guys' house is right on the trail. With just, you know, a little bit of woods between their house and the trail. And it slopes down to their house from the trail, if you can remember, just from walking by it.
So
The area that has the hay covering the being vegetated.
That's up
Oh,
right here.
That red line. So you
See
got.
the watershed line?
Kind of-
See the watershed line?
You do it, Jason. I'm,
So where we parked and walked up onto the trail was, there's the watershed that we
Oh, yeah.
parked next to.
Oh,
And then walked there. So this is that revegetated area,
Oh.
or the repair, the area that we're looking at here.
the bike trails are green,
Correct.
what's yellow?
That's the delineated area, that our engineers surveyed. We consider here a bike trail, we can have resources, just, have it. Yeah.
yeah, that was VHB, not KAS.
What is going to be the future use of the area that we walked over that was spongy with all the hay on it?
So that has been, in the past, before the bike trails, that was used by the 4x4 center. It was just essentially a work road, so we just had vehicles going back and forth, also where the bike trail is. But when the bike trail came through, that part of the work road became unusable, it's cut off by the bike trail. So the future use of that will just continue to be a ski trail. And then it'll just be naturalized and just allowed to grow in the summer. I mean, we do have to mow all of the ski trails every year to keep the growth down, you know what I mean? So it'll continue to, once it has the greenery grow up, it'll have to have mowing like the rest of the ski trails, but no summer use other than, you know, presumably like people walk off.
Yeah, so the bike trail is not behind the Judah house.
That's right, there's this,
There's an existing ski trail, but not a bike trail.
correct. I mean, it goes,
Bike trail comes nearest to Megan's house.
it does.
Okay.
Yeah,
I would say also John, here, like, small proximity.
oh, totally,
Yeah.
that's right. I forgot about them, just because they're not here.
Yeah.
John and
They-
Chris's
they
house is right above, right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Um,
So John and Chrissy and Andy and Megan, you know, they're right behind the ski trail where that portion of the bike trail, you know, runs. Yeah. Which was formerly formerly a work road since we've had it, but before that, before the 4x4 center came in, prior to our ownership, way back, it was just.
So now every property is not like standard, every property below the river Christie, actually even more above that. But every single property that you see down below from their property precincts, along this wall. To the point where it's blowing out people's driveways, wow. etc.
Mr. O'Neill, when it's raining really hard for a long time, do you ever walk up and down this section?
I do.
What? And you've been at the DVR for a while.
Yes, there's that 96.
Just wondering what the presence of the bike trail by itself seems to do in terms of how it changed the flow of water. How it may have accelerated it or otherwise changed it. And
I can't assume that
it is,
I'm sorry.
and what did or what has it done in response to that to try to mitigate that? That question make any sense?
I believe so. You're asking what, for the bike, what impact the bike trail has done to the direction flow of water, I assume. And then what we're doing to get that. Is that correct? So basically, I can't assume that the mountain bike trail necessarily would change anything in that particular area of trail, just due to the fact that there was a worker in that place. I didn't think there. You know, basically that long ditch line you saw where we let you cut through, that was done by, you know, it's been previous use of that trail. And so for that particular section, I would say that. I would also say that, you know, we talked about that because we're trying to naturalize that basically a direct response to our, trying to help out our community, trying to move better there. Stuff consolidating that water and keeping down that work road. And it's just allows the water to go where it wants to go. And aside from that, you know, obviously, we're trying to move the water away from our neighborhood residents there. Inevitably, like that will happen fast. We're still working on it.
If, for example, the applicant increase the depth of the ditching on both sides of section that runs above the houses, on that section of Wentworth, would something like that, and sending the water this to further someplace else. Have you looked at, have you ever looked at what it would take to do a workaround for the increased flow that's happening for some reason, whether it's climate change or the bike trails or something we haven't talked about yet? If that's what your mission was, your goal was, could it be done? What would it look like?
Well,
And I'd ask Mr. Diglio to respond to that.
appreciate that. We've been working to try several things to figure out, we are, saving, water on our mountain, like it's trying to well, down farm where my shop is. That being said, I feel that ditch line, I was in, Henry's. We only seen one instance where it's been an issue during the same storms that took out our road last year. And we haven't had any problem just with there since. So that being said, it's an ongoing process. We're learning a lot every year. And we're trying, very much like the towns are, we're also in our culverts. We're trying to get our first spot first. That's basically our approach this time. Steve can sort of guide.
Yeah, so in this particular section, I walked the green trail above the properties of concern. So this watershed goes up to the top of Snow Lake. You see it, here's that right there. And I walked the green trail. I'm not seeing any diversion by the green trail, but meaning more waters. Like water's not transferring from one watershed to another, at least not noticeably that I saw. So, and there's a low spot right above their house, like where that ditch you're talking about, the deep end would be. And that low spot, so I basically figure out what was going there, assuming that before any man-made work is done here, so before the water road and everything. And then post. And it seemed to me the big addition was from the work road going up to the water tower, up to that water bar where we walked up to. And that water bar was actually reestablished recently, and that was one of the issues I think that caused more water over here this spring. It was mistakenly taken out and put back now. So that low spot is basically going to get that water no matter what. The phrase that people keep saying that, I wish the applicant would keep the water on their property, but water doesn't care about property lines. It just doesn't. It cares about topography, and things of that nature. So, when you look at that topography without that ditch, and there's a lead brick right there, you think water will spill over into the two properties, keeping part of that. No matter what, so that ditch is then creating a diversion and then sending it to other people. So everybody doesn't want it on their property, but eventually it goes somewhere. The big thing here, though, is there's the town road actually channels a ton of water. So basically, almost all the snowflake gets, except for what's being kind of realigned here, gets channeled along the uphill side of Wentworth. And then crosses under the one, there's two culverts up near the water tower, and then there's not another one near the bottom of the road where, Stony and Mike, Somalis, their property, right above their property, and then it kind of screamed down. So there's a lack of options to direct water onto Wentworth that makes sense. So, what they're doing now, realistically, there probably should be more water heading to these properties than there is. And that ditch, deeping it would be difficult without, blasting and stuff, but it's not going to solve your groundwater issue anyways. Groundwater is going to travel along that shallow ledge no matter what. We have glacial till on top of the ledge there. So, the ability for water to infiltrate is very limited in general. This month we've had 6 inches. I don't know, we've had almost record rain. It doesn't take much to saturate the soil. And once these soils are saturated, they basically act like pavement. It's just running off at a very high rate. We're seeing that all over the place. I'm on Thatcher Road, not affected by these trails. And I'm seeing all the same issues. There's the increased surface water. increased groundwater, I'm seeing water popping out of the ground where, you know, bowls and stuff. So I'm just seeing water changing direction. I'm seeing it jump from one water to another above where there's any development happening, just naturally water flowing out. And it's happening just naturally up here and, you know, non-developed areas. But in general, I mean, anytime you pack soil, you're gonna change things a little bit. I'm not seeing any significant diversions created by these trails. It seems like they work with the topography. Some of the cross culverts, you know, are small, on the smaller side, when they overtop, they're still overtopping the trail, staying in the watershed. And there's, you know, sediment catchers and everything, that's just, those are mostly there to keep things established and you just keep, you know, digging them out. But that was part of the plan by VHB and how they needed to manage it, but I'm not seeing a significant diversion except for that work thing, that's what they're looking at. Natural light and cut off, and then basically at that point, the same amount of flow that used to go there would be going there again, as far as that's information back.
What about the culvert, you know, like, I mean, kind of talk about these, like that part of the field that you like, through culverts.
There's roughly 20 culverts pointing down there. that
It's going like in the direction. You kind of, well, they all kind of end up in the same place, right? Like, so.
Yeah, with or without those culverts, water would still end up in a spot.
At a slower pace.
Um,
At a slower pace.
at a slower pace, it's hard to tell. I mean, because you're getting more travel along the trail too, and it goes out into, you know, forested areas where, you know.
So when you open up a culvert and you put hard packed trails over the top of it, you're saying that doesn't increase the velocity of water?
Anytime you compact the surface, you want to increase the velocity.
And then and now,
But
I've got one.
if you increase the length of travel, you can counter that. So,
Well, you increase the length of the travel, but you have nothing to stop the velocity of that travel.
But, I have a couple of follow-up questions. Particularly out of the, if you know, are the stormwater infrastructure, maintenance and repair activities that we saw when we were on the mountain, are those done annually as part of the effort to comply with the existing permits for the area?
yeah, Jake and I talk about cleaning those out annually, more than annually. Because I think that
It's been challenging.
Does anyone from the state come up periodically and inspect any of those?
Both I and Steve have
Was that more?
both I and Steve record report.
yes, we submit the ESP and OSPC reports to the state. I'm not sure if Taylor is or not. Taylor, I did not know. It would be the,
There were some site visits last year, 3 site visits by A&R to look at stormwater in this area following the complaint that you guys submitted. Yeah, with three site visits, 2 with Dana, Nagy, and then 1, I can't remember the first name, but I'm sure.
Yeah, Taylor communicated to me that she was happy. But I don't think she's that well, right? So she does the voting.
Jake and I know a little bit, walk the most sensitive parts, especially near wetlands, that make sure that the area is being well maintained. And, you know, this area is looking at detail views about the land. There was a culvert where that little bridge was now replaced, which was acting like almost like a control where I think it was 15-inch, there's a hump in it, there's only so much flow that can go through the floor. And that was causing spillover onto their property. But the bridge basically cleared that.
So
Yeah.
the I'm gonna ask, I don't know who should answer this, but it's, sort of a hypothetical question, it's sort of a what if, or what if not? And the answers to those are not always very reliable, because there's a lot of assumptions built into them. But I think it's worth asking it just to get some opinions. Is if the bike trails have never been built, would something like the conditions on the Wentworth properties be happening? More or less, or not? And I understand there's no scientific way of doing that, but I guess I'd just like some opinion about that from the applicant, and then I'll ask you. I think we've heard from other parties.
I'm just gonna kick it to Steve, he's our.
I mean, there would still be at least 3.9 acres, in my opinion, that drain to that spot with or without the bike trail. There was, I think, I'm talking about the low line area above their property. So I think it was the work road that changed things, not the bike.
I mean, we does not.
Yeah.
That was there is a change for the product, but
And we never had issues with that. And the reason why we're here now is because there is an issue, because when you're beyond something. When you change the flow of water uphill on the properties, and you force it down onto the community, that's not okay. All we're asking is that they do the right thing and divert the water away from our properties. And they're, to their own property, to their own property. In fact, to their own property. But as you can see, what's happening is they're actually putting forward some to save their trail to the benefit of, again, their trail and at the cost of the area. And there has been a noticeable difference, as we've said before, and as also pointed out, we're seeing water coming into our basements now that never happened prior to the Mountain Walk Trail. When Irene came through, we never had water coming in to our property, into our house. Now we have 2 inches of rain, and we have water flowing over our ditches into our property, and we have water coming in our basement. We don't want to be here.
Understood.
yeah, this is not how I say. I'm
Good.
gonna tell you.
Ask, Ms. Stickney, do you have anything, words of wisdom or questions to share with us, or people here?
So
Why don't you come
I
up?
work in the enforcement realm. I am not officially part of the hearing on this particular issue. So the only thing that I can offer is that you make the rules point request for report, which will do in this time.
Sorry, could you come all the way up? I'm having a hard time.
Yeah, so I work in enforcement, I do not work in permitting, and there's some fire laws between the two entities. So I'm not here as the witness. I'm here to look at the bike trails, because there is an enforcement issue about a different permit amendment for a permit that was already been issued. So I use this opportunity to take the trip up the mountain and look at the whole, so that I can make my conclusions about the color enforcement position separate from the 32C application. What I can do is, the commission desires a Rule 20 request, get a letter or report from me about my position that was in there. I say, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a stormwater expert. I do have a lot of background and that knowledge. That's what we found in my enforcement work.
Thank you.
Well, I have a question, to the specificity of the actual request, which is extended out, okay? So we're talking about essentially, if my computation's right, it's an extra month at the beginning, and 2 at the end, and when you put the days in, we're roughly talking about 48 additional days.
So we're not asking to change our operating season at all.
Right, so I'm figuring in on the month of May, let's say we've got 4 weeks in the month of May, and you're adding 4 additional days. That'd be 16 more days in May. And at the back end, September to the end of October, 2 months. That's 32 days.
Yeah, so
8 weeks at 4 is 32, so a total of extra 48 days. How impactful would those 48 days be in the scheme of what we're talking about?
So I'll just correct it slightly. We don't need any more days in May. It's just June, September, October. And October, the season ends 30th, no, it's the end through October. Okay, I just want to make sure, sorry. I forget.
So
So
that's when I'm at June to,
Yeah, true. That's what it's.
yeah.
okay, yeah, so it's just June, September, October, so those three. We will not, we would not shift the way we our opening day. You know, so like, for example, this year we're opening June 13th, which is a little later than usual, but last year was so rainy and that we just needed a little more time, not just on the bike trail, but just on work roads and just with mountain maintenance, as you guys saw today. A lot of work happening up there. So it wouldn't change the day we open. So like, you know, I was reflecting a little bit while Walter was talking about, you know, equipment. It wouldn't shift any of the work, the timeline of any of the work that we do to get the mountain open. We would just operate. Once we open, it would give us the flexibility to operate more if it made sense. But it would not shift, you know, the preseason work or the postseason work or when we open or when we close.
Understood, but the question is, how impactful, if it's, let's say at the maximum is 48 days within those months that we're talking about, that you don't have that flexibility.
Yeah.
How impactful would that activity be to the runoff?
Well, that's what I'm trying to say is there would be no change to the runoff.
Okay.
No change to anything because all of the work is still going to be done on the same timelines.
So that increased activity would not affect the
There would
impact.
be zero change to anything related to trails, trail construction and trail maintenance. It's literally just an hours of operation request. Yeah, no change.
That increased traffic will further impact or compact is the better word, compact the trails to increase the run.
No, absolutely not.
They reason that.
Yeah, no, and
How do you guys, can you just talk me through the process of decide, like, you'll say it's Saturday and you on the people, but you think that it's raining too much, like, you just talk.
so we meet daily or every day that we operate, we have a daily meeting. So when we're, you know, so every day that we operate, we have a daily meeting. We call it dirt plan. And, at that meeting, we've got members of trail crew, mountain operations, patrol, you know, everybody who's on the trails. Before patrol opens trails, they do trail checks. So they'll ride down and check the trail to make sure that it's good to open. Also, trail crew is always going, you know, after any kind of event to go and check on the conditions of trails, whether there's any concerning areas or anything like that. And they make the trail, the patrol decides what can open and what can close. And this is true in the winter too. It's actually a very similar process. And if the trail is not in a condition to be open, then it's closed. And if it's okay to open, then it's open. And each day, so let's say that we're meeting on a Tuesday, we'll meet and we'll look ahead to Wednesday. What do we know is going to be open, or what do we anticipate is being open? What do we know is not in good shape and is going to be closed? What's the weather? You know, we look at the forecast. What are we anticipating? Do we think there's any potential for closures? Is there lightning, for example? You know, whatever. And then anything that is sort of a question mark gets checked in the morning by patrol, and then that gets communicated to our marketing department and our guest services department, which obviously are guest facing and communicate that information out. So it's a pretty robust, ongoing, everyday, you know, very hands-on process. And it's always changing. So, you know, you'll have a rain event and this trail will be closed, and then 2 days later it reopens because they've had a chance to go in fix whatever blew out if it was a big event, or, you know, it just dries out or whatever. You. Yes, yeah, just like, it's just exactly like filter, you put it, you just put the thing, close the side, and it's on the website. It's very much like, it's a mimic of the filter system, yeah, so it's just what you would see in like.
Andrew, is there anything that you would like to share with us that you haven't shared yet? Okay. Megan, how about you? For any more?
I can go. I don't know, I have a second, so if you guys are somebody to go talk about the end of my two, like, how.
I mean, I think we have an hour left. And I think we have time if you
You
do
don't
want
have to use all of them.
Yeah, I think if we can finish early, that's always great, but, I'm unable to open the presentation, but what I think you could do,
I could get.
yeah, do you have your computer with you? So I think if you just log into the Teams meeting, you could just share your screen, because yeah, okay, I'm trying to think if that's. It's similar to if, someone had submitted information for the Finland, and it's, you know, up to the commission is open, it wants to view what Megan has put together and submitted. As it,
Yeah, I sort of felt like it would be easier than writing long testimony to like be able to talk. Whatever, I mean, it'll be there for you to view on your phone later. I'm happy to also submit written testimony, but I feel like in this case, it's a little bit easier to ask people to dialogue.
Yeah, I can.
Um,
So see if we can make it.
so that's the approach, but I feel like, you know, I want this to be. Do on our computer.
so there's a free public Wi-Fi RFL. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So Steph, you'll have to, when Megan joins, you'll have to give her access to share.
Well, Megan's setting up, just out of curiosity, you're a civil engineer, with all due respect to your profession, have you had and to speak to water, have you had a hydrologist give any analytics on this?
I'm a hydrologist, I mean, well, I do hydrologic kind of analysis, so I've been over 20 years.
Okay.
We haven't done any groundwater, type of analysis on it, except for, using, and, you know, the soil survey information is done.
And your video too.
So I did a full, hydrologic.
Okay.
Oh,
How
That's good practice for us.
I think more than that.
how do we do that? So if you open the participants on the side, like click people,
Thanks, Steve.
if you click people at the top. I did. Oh, on yours, so there should be like the three dots that you can give permission to. Yeah, so
There's something. Oh, yeah. You should be able to share it, either share just the document or. We've done this before.
Okay.
Right.
How we doing?
And then. Yeah. I think so. Question. What? It doesn't. Yeah, so try to just be there and be really still. They're sharing their. We're all learning this thing, just share. And maybe the whole thing, just to see that. I mean, that's what you do. Go in. Do your shares pretty good. The gross share pretty good.
Mr.
Oh, it's green. Yeah.
But it's someone using it.
Right.
And what do you?
Are you going to ask me? Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, like, yeah. And so you see if you can probably.
I gotta bring it in.
Mark it might Oh, like you get one of these.
Yeah, just try it, see if it works.
I might, I probably just minimize what you're doing, but it won't do automation.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at.
See if you click the presentation.
Yeah, I mean, like.
Yeah, we could just get this. But it.
Yeah, I mean, I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you do that, right?
Right, yeah, if it ends up being.
Yeah.
All right, that's not, I think we're.
So so like just mentioned, I thought it'd be a little bit easier for this to be kind of interactive, where you would be knowing what's going on. This, why this approach is easier to say that would be on the train. And I hate when we have to turn off the subtitle machine, we just not worry about it.
Oh, your transcription.
That's part of it. It's just like kind of distracting, but. Very fun with that. Yeah. Is it part of you? Well. I mean, I can just ignore it. I think it's just ignore it. What is, are you, it should, if it was transcribed,
Try it again.
it would probably be through that your software, right? Yeah.
Yeah, try it.
Right. Yeah. I thought so, but maybe we didn't.
I said we just go there.
Yeah, but I mean, just try to learn. So I know it's helpful for you all to ask me and to learn what it is. Well, I have to do something first. Using the boundary trail map, it kind of just gives a sense of like where the trails are in relation to us. And this is, I don't think perfect is the right word, but it's not, you know, to scale, I don't think, it's just a visual representation, so that's important to keep in mind. I tried to assess where I think my property is on this map, and I believe it's that, that middle at the lower right hand corner, the yellow, box. And then that whole circle area in red, around that is sort of like all of my properties. Then I circled above that, the larger area in, purple, which is like the section of that beginner trail that kind of sits above us. So I think we've talked a lot about criteria for today. That's probably where we're going to spend my time. So I believe you all probably know this. But that particular trail, the green trail was installed in spring. And this may be inaccurate based on some further conversation I had. I was under the impression that there was wetlands, that were altered by this. I think I heard someone indicating that may not be true. But I will say with certainty that we've seen an increase in water volume in last year, the mountain rainfall in our house. There are no wetlands up the mountain to like hold and slow any of the water coming down. And from my view at least, and I think that, you know, we felt at least like in recent years that there's been water in there, which essentially is about protect us to our property. So, you know, my particularized interest on this bridging is this. I just noted a moment ago that I've almost go flow that we're now starting to see were very normal, rain events. The most recent one was just a few days ago. There's an open online channel called My Property that, routinely uses and collect sediment. And it seems from our view to saturate, the adjacent down slope. I think Chrissy and John mentioned that they're paying on the property. We talked about it already, the soil cover is generally pretty shallow over the edge, especially, in the bottom part of our yard. And, we've seen that there's a lot of soil saturation lately, which ultimately is facilitating the water running directly over the ledge. And it seems to be, impacting our property. Prior to the trail installation, to mention the same goal, we weren't seeing this. These two maps are, we've already estimated, we don't need to spend a lot of time here probably. But the properties that have a number written on them are the ones that I believe are seen to, you know, walking neighbors seem to be impacted in some way by the increased runoff flow. I did put you know, property value estimate on here. This is a low ball, this is based on below many of the owner properties for good standards. That I know that estimate for our home books, but elsewhere. Just to know that, like, and Walter also alluded to that in his testimony, like, this is a value to us. This is, you know, big value to us. So, in my view, I think it's important. The map on the right-hand side, I took from, Gold Valley Master Plan, which you can find great wetlands map of research on our website. But it does show some pockets of, say, I'm sorry, but you can see the loop, again, this is, you know, it's not perfect, but you can see the loop of properties there. There's definitely wetlands showing in that region, behind our homes, and there's some pockets of.
Where the trail would be, typically.
And so I feel like this is really important to know because it's surprising to me. And I did a little bit of looking back on oversight and Walter's, what the oversight of this town was sort of in this kind of process. So what I found, and I wasn't engaged in this because I truthfully had no idea what was to come and how this was going to impact me. In September 2020, it seems that the zoning and the town zoning administrator and the DRB essentially said the non-bike expansion project is skip the normal review process. In some of that correspondence, like Mindy noted that she really needed to move things forward from like time and money standpoint. The town did, I think, have some reservations about this. It seemed in that correspondence, the zoning administrator was really worried about like how exemptions could impact future trail expansion projects. DRB also noted some concerns and see as part of that conversation, I think we were coming back to the limit that you were concerned about control of runoff.
What did you say?
You noted that you have concern about control of runoff. Yeah.
At that time, we did.
This was a while ago.
Just weird, because on that.
So these are, I'm just including these for your reference, I just read the details, but this is the first time in zoning. Is a kind of, so that you have the information at the end of the central. First email that I shared here between the zoning administrators sort of talking about, I think my understanding, and you might be able to explain better, I was there. But it sounds like there was a change in zoning administrators like around that time. The prior administrator had said, you know, that essentially this wasn't gonna have to go through the whole process. And he left and the new guy came in and the new guy was like, wait, I don't know how I know about this. So I think part of this is communication related, issues. But these are some of the concerns that he expressed, one being that he was worried that if there was not oversight of things like that expansion, Like for this particular project, that could mean that there might never be oversight, and he says here, or I probably say, 100 miles of trail without any oversight, could be a potential loophole that would be exploitable. But then he came back, he said, well, I consulted the town attorney, and we've essentially determined that the regs were written poorly, and we're just gonna act on good faith here and allow things to go. And then they talked about how they needed more information. Similar, I think, with the review board, they talked about it, yeah, I think it notes here, Steve, that you talked about your concerns being related to new infrastructure, design, framework review, such as commercial use of the trail system, trail management and control of water. And then Rob is on to say, oh, most trails are being built by professionals, which is quite an interesting statement because I was told they're also being built by professionals in the review process. But it is what it is. So I think the town, the town kind of like pulled themselves out of this. And so there's no oversight from the town perspective, which I don't know, it's to me a little bit concerning, but there's not much we can do about it now. I think in one of the zoning administrators emails, I don't know, but I feel like he did mention something about active review. I'll have that come up and essentially said, well, if active review is gonna be there, we're gonna stop what they're gonna do. Okay, this is a kind of a heavy slide. I don't know if we're going through all the details. Maybe I'll try to skim through it. So we're keeping some time on it. But this is like a timeline from my perspective for what happened with Andy and I during ours and Mill Valley essentially. So May 22, that new Aaron Valley was installed for whoever property. And it was immediately obvious to us there was a problem with the way that the water channels were essentially like set up for water. In particular, behind our house, there was a culvert going uphill at some sides. And there was like instantly cooling there. In June of 2022, I have documentation from DVR saying, yeah, this is a problem, we're gonna fix it. That concern was not addressed, and any sort of discussion. So April 24, almost 2 years later, nothing's been addressed. No path comes through, tries to move a bunch of, I think to spread it out maybe a little bit faster.
So they can use the bike trailer.
In the process, they smashed the berm.
Above our house.
Eric and Lindsay, I think both do that maybe. And I can't remember the website. I know Eric was up there. Briefly, and Eric had said, we're gonna be back to it with the same amount of promise. Did that happen? Of course not. So then, fast forward to June, we have that really, really heavy rain in June. And we again alerted when we had an issue in the house, and we did finally start having a real conversation, I think, about it.
Yeah, and we actually met with her at that time, because at that point, that berm that you saw above our house was totally destroyed. We have pictures and everything. I think we might have seen them. And so we went down and we talked, and Liz was there, and I think Claire was there as well. And just the hurricane. Oh, yes. So then the hurricane comes, and we were literally that morning before it comes. And we said, listen, this is dire. We need this fixed. We have an inordinate amount of rain coming. And her response was, I hope it doesn't rain that much. And as the property owner, you're told that, and you have no control over that water flow that they've totally changed up above us. And then they say, well, we're not going to fix it right now, even though we know this is coming. And then my neighbor and I, the person down here, Matt Moore, said, we were literally up there in the middle of the night with plywood sheets trying to hold the water back from our property.
And Sean walked the trails, like opening up your parts.
And all the
Which I
tunnels were
understand.
closed. It was a total disaster.
Here, but it was absolutely horrible.
But that water totally wiped out driveways, it jumped, all that water jumped, our properties onto the town road and even down across, the properties on the other side of the. So it's an inordinate amount of water that's being channeled through there. The velocity in which it travels is incredible. There's no riprap, there's nothing to stop any type of velocity. They just have a straight channel shooting down. Okay.
Okay, so that was Meryl. Lindsay did come and say, we make that, we met Lindsay, I think it was like maybe July 12th or thereabouts, but Lindsay came up and down, Chrissy, Andy, myself, Matt, maybe December, and James there too. First looked at that and, I think he was there, I think there were a lot of suggestions put out as to how this is gonna get approved. And then BBR finally did come to thereafter and at least reinforce the form in our house.
Because it was just blown out.
We were also told at that time, like, this is, fixing this problem is gonna take all summer, we're gonna start next week, we're gonna start 2 weeks, we're gonna start 3 weeks. Finally, in October, I think it was the 22nd, it came Jake improving, we came up and did replace that, that upper board with grid. We're gonna go over today. That was really all that was done at that time. Got an email November 2nd saying matter closed, DVR considered the point. I know Walter and I both, I think also, we have noted there was mentioned available to the fees. Walter and I both sent emails around that time, they would love to be able to do this, and, this be water process where it should be what's going on, and we never received this. I didn't see one, don't believe we did either. So then, I guess, fast forward to this May, that area that we looked at today, just because everything on May 6th. And of course, the rain the next day, a lot of that material ended up eroding down into the channel below, and that's, big part of why there's so much sediment view down here. We walked the trail. Let's see. I think it was during that event also that the trail blew out in that upper curve section. There was a small 8-inch culvert up there, completely buried. BVR did come in and replace that. I think I mentioned this earlier. They replaced it prior to the second rain. I think they replaced it around 20, I think, they might have been a big spot. On that, but, nothing below that was, improved over things. But fortunately, I think that did see the trail on the next rain. It didn't necessarily save our property. But I think the priorities are, kind of on there. So I keep noting these two, like, May rate events, I'm gonna talk about them a little bit more because this is current. I don't know that it's worth talking about past for governments. I think that that's too far, I think. So there was that heavy rain on May 17th, did cause excessive runoff. We also damaged, the Parkland town property at bottom Weber Road, and that's the top image there. So I followed the water path from top to bottom and, essentially like goes along all of those lower properties, including Walters, sends the water into yards and then either the rest of it ends up like shooting through the woods on the empty parcel that, Walter never is full, I think now by resort, drops into, Wentworth condos channel and then shoot down the street. So kind of throughout the end of that, Wentworth condos channel, and then water carried across the street. The town had actually just needed this like a few days prior to the rain, but it was maybe it was pointing out comes down. And then, let's see, August was on, sure I gotta do that. Yeah, so I noticed this before. BBR, you know, in that form also sustained trail management, which I referenced. And they did come to an outside their culvert. That's what the other image is of. So this is just what the water will look like over their trail. And then I'm gonna move on now and I'll talk about the second rain, which is a much, you know, I don't know what the volume of the rain was, but the second one, I think we need to now mention, I think Walter talked about that as well. So these are some images from that second rain just a few days ago, which I think was pretty typical rain in Maine, Vermont. This is the outside culvert, the outside culvert on the left, there's a ton of sediment. I can see how round it is. The middle section here is a video. So this is where the culvert shoot out towards my property. And there is, you know, the stone there kind of block it from the roadway, but there's a lot of water there. It's like I said, this is a normal thing for them. You know, this isn't like, you know, hurricane weather.
And what happens is you can see where those stones are, but we have like 4 to 5 inches of rain, and literally that's what you said along that comes rocks. It comes right over our pond.
Last image on the right is just that, with that much water. You know, like this month is sunny surf, it hasn't been turned out. So then this is moving down to our property. Andy, I think both were just like shocked at how much water we received during this rain. Like this is a new development. It was really surprising and honestly quite stressful for us. And I noticed before, like we've invested a lot of time and energy capital into our rating and our drainage system. So this first image or video, and it's kind of hard to see how it's raining, but you know, this is up with like just water flowing over ledge underneath. There's like a hole there, same kind of talked about, same zone that something's property as well. The image in the middle is fully behind it, got like a and the yard a bunch of possibly there and you know, mounted up. We got a bunch of water in here. I've never seen that before. And then the last of the video, more training. And I just walked up to see where it was coming from. But again, something that, you know, we're not having seen this in the past.
Again, this is just a normal rate, but we're really concerned when there's actually going to be, you know, sizable events. This is the impact. Like I said before, we're already getting water coming into our basin.
Yeah.
Never had before found like churches.
So I'm just a historian here and then, you know, here's my question. Normal. Doesn't seem normal to me. It isn't normal. But this particular rainfall, just a few short days ago, you know, I don't think it was atypical for Vermont, and then especially in spring. So we have a perimeter drain in our foundation for our engineering yard. I mentioned before, those were built, for spring runoff back in 2018. And based on, you know, that the spring runoff at that time was steam flow. It no longer is 16. But just a few short years ago, that worked really, really well, especially with water away from our home. Now what we're finding is that our soil is so saturated for normal rainfall that all the runoff coming from above, it's like causing cooling, it's causing water to go down the drain. And so, you know, we're kind of in an interesting situation for ourselves. We're kind having to figure out like, well, how are we gonna be able to further protect our property? And that's hard to stomach when it seems like the water supply is some low. So I also know here that drain will be for sure, that is super shallow, cover on that.
One of my people that can break through.
And what we're seeing is that, you know, our perimeter improvement is being overloaded. And then the water pressure, essentially, water, our foundation, again, kind of a new development, not very pleased about it. So we've been advised to ask second surgery, and we see those in the woods to help reduce that fish load in the soil before it gets the permanent energy. But, you know, the advice we're receiving also is, yeah, that's not gonna solve the problem now. I mean, it'll not solve the problem. So I'm kind of following this up with a couple quotes from Lindsay, and I'd love to sort of hear more on your thinking here, Lindsay, just, you know, taking what we've shared today into account maybe. So the first was earlier this month, you know, you mentioned, and I think, you know, Steve talked about as well, we just said that there's like more water should be diverted for our property. The view is that we've been advised on any further action that works more stormwater beyond what we've already done, would be counterproductive, create national precedent on other street channels. To me, like what I'm hearing from that is there's too much water and you have to decide whose yard to send it through, whose property to send it through. I don't know if that's what you meant. I'd love to hear what, you know, what that means. And I think because I don't really understand, why my property, my neighbor's property is going to be collateral damage for your business opportunity. And if you don't want to speak to that, that's fine. But
I'm happy to respond at this meeting.
or no, I mean, I'm sort of curious, like, I mean, if you know, you have like further thoughts on that? I'm, you know, wondering what that even means to you. I just told you what I think on it.
Good. Just the last thought.
I have a couple more. You want to keep
Okay,
going?
let's go through.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. We're getting there, I promise. Yeah, so this is my summary, though, kind of bringing it back to what I mentioned before, though. I am a bit worried about early season, rain a lot, late season, we've seen that this month. And what I do know is that with heavy rain and fell hanging over the far at least, this tends to be impacted. And we saw that in the where that section was blown out. What I've also observed, and you know, you guys may not agree with the statement, but my observation is that trail maintenance is a much higher priority than water maintenance, and that is when during operating periods, even like a more stark difference in the two. Reason being that operation seems to continue to not be able to be open, and so they'll rush up there and get to the trail. They don't even look at like what's happening inside the trail. They just want to get the trail open. I also shared a quote here from the Green Mountain Club, because I think it's sort of like, you know, it brings it full circle. For me, I mean, the Green Mountain Club encourages or discourages, I should say, hikers from using trails early in the season for like really similar reasons, right? So this is what I'll just read the first part of this. This time of year, muddy trails are oversaturated with soil and more vulnerable to erosion. This is the same as mountain bike trails, I think, right? And in any area or waterlogged. And so, you know, I'm also thinking about that from the perspective of at least the early season portion of this, and much less concerned, I think, with late season. And then my second criteria, which I'm really only one slide on, was related to synthetic noise. Not nearly as impactful my day-to-day, but I will say that, you know, so we live outside, obviously for a reason. We do enjoy recreating where we live, and we understand other people do too. But there were not always mountain bikes, like the JCR property we do enjoy, like you can ride occasionally and spend hours, you know, ends up really enough for us. And then, you know, finally, I just wanted to provide some, you know, suggested conditions from my standpoint, and I had consulted, you know, with my engineer on this, and we came up with it, maybe kind of track, right? But this is what I would love to see for some iteration of it. And again, with the idea in mind that I really just, I would like my property to be protected, I like my neighbor's property to be protected. So I'd like to see the primary water channel, for that trail all the way on the outside, part of the outside right now, but not the section behind my house. I really would like to see the culverts removed that are for specifically my property, but essentially all the Whitworth properties. I think it'd be a great benefit to install some kind of impervious layer on, the primary trail section so that we don't have to worry about as much saturation of the soil. I mean, it would also be strengthened by having riprap and slow down, potentially velocity water coming through that channel. I'd like the current existing ditch to be a backup ditch. So I don't want water to be directed into that on purpose. I want it to be there to catch water that isn't caught by the main channel or that runs off of the trail, and the trail remains there. I'd like to see the water going down towards the door, where they can actually manage it themselves instead of sending it to my property or my neighbor's property to manage. And that might mean that they drop it into the retention pool and then it slowly goes down, you know, through the town channel. But, you know, I think, you know, where we're coming from, where the neighbors are coming from, is that we're really frustrated that the onus is being put on us to manage the increased water, which we're seeing from the mountain bike trails. And then along with that, I would absolutely love to see either that the trail section where people talk about how there's like a dip, and water actually crosses the trail all the time, that spot over top. I'd like to see the trail built up and actually like ground properly so the water sheds down into the primary channel. Or I'd love to see the trail just, you know, that section could also be revegetated, keeping in mind that the water like still needs to be moved away from the homes. And maybe the trail being moved. Lindy's referenced several times that Steve made this recommendation for overlaying this hydraulic system that I've not seen. I don't know the details of that, but you know, from my perspective, that may also provide some type of solution. And I think that covers it for me. So should I stop?
Yes, so you stop sharing and you can exit the call. If
All right.
that's whenever.
Thank you.
I guess, now would be, give DVR a chance to respond to that or provide any other testimony like.
To respond to. I mean, I'll just say, you know, very briefly on this issue, it really seems to me like there's a difference in, I don't want to say opinion, because I think, you know, that there's a lack of understanding about sort of what's possible with regard to stormwater management. And, you know, I didn't see this on the timeline, so maybe it was there. But before the site visits and when we really started to have conversations about the stormwater flow related to the mountain bike trails, I invited Andy and Megan to come into my office. And the reason why I did that, I can't remember the conversations that preceded it, and presumably they were just, I have looked through my email to see if I could find it. I think it's, you know, we are across the street neighbors, so I'm guessing it's this conversation. But I had the idea that there was a misunderstanding or a misalignment in terms of expectations of how much water we should be managing. And so I invited them to come to my office with the express purpose of trying to get on the same page around what's a reasonable expectation for us, because it would be very easy, and I think we're at that point where we're really talking against each other. And, you know, the water that when we have a big storm, and we have had some significant storms in the past few years, and I do hope that stops happening, because putting incredible pressure on everybody, you know, not just us, but obviously around the state. We're really struggling with it. And, you know, the reference in this keeps being that we need to take care of our water. But the water that comes onto the mountain and in a big rainstorm, you know, it's not our water, it's the water that falls. And we see our responsibility as making sure that the amount of water that flows from our property to other properties is not more than would naturally occur. That's sort of the threshold that we understand of stormwater management when you're making changes. You know, we were not under the impression that there was a deficiency to our trails with regard to stormwater management prior to making a lot of the improvements that you saw today on the site visit. But, you know, these guys have, as you can hear, serious concerns. And I know that they're genuine. You know, I know that they are really worried about their property and they believe everything that they're saying. But I can speak for myself and my crew that, you know, we are trying to do at every point what we can, but also what's reasonable. And there's only so much we can do when we get 2 inches of rain in a rainstorm. 3 inches, last year we got a 4-inch rainstorm. More than that. Oh, that's true, we had even like 6. I mean, so these are unprecedented, you know. When we look back at the permit, a heavy rain event was considered a half an inch in an hour. You know, an inch of rain is a significant amount of rain. We're having these higher rainstorms in recent years. And we're having to grapple with that, not just in this location, but across our entire resort, and not just with the bike trail, but on our work roads, on the town roads, on the back road, everywhere. This is a problem. So when I invited them to my office before all of this really blew up, which is really unfortunate, it was really with the purpose of trying to say, we have to have the same understanding of what a reasonable stormwater management is, because we can't stop all the water from going onto your property. You know, the water flows. And just, I will reference what Megan said about me saying about the downstream effects, because I'm not a civil engineer, but we hire a lot of them. And, you know, one of the messages that I get, not only on this project, but in general, is that there's a balance that you need to strike. This is my understanding, a balance that you need to strike with stormwater management, where yes, you don't want to put more water where it naturally wouldn't have been. And that includes downstream. If you create too much stormwater management, then you're sending more water down below. And this idea that we could somehow keep the water on our property is, it's not realistic. So,
I mean, that's a possibility. That would be totally going on.
Now, aren't you making our case when you say that when you have low water from above, you can't handle it, so then
Like you
that's
did,
what you're doing.
well,
Like,
and I think what we saw with, okay, sorry.
The process doesn't include arguing with each other, even if you want, and you have a good cause to, but, so it's Bolton Valley have anything else you'd like?
yeah, so I just wanted to address that.
Keep in mind that within a couple of days of concluding this hearing, we will send what we call a hearing recess order, which will be asking for, you know, I'll ask questions that came up for us during the course of all the testimony, for seeking additional advice and input. And there will be an opportunity for you to file something in writing, sort of like your final argument.
Yeah, so I guess I would just say, I don't really have an argument to make or even a response to make, but I just, after listening to all that for half an hour, I just, you know, I have a natural impulse to offer our side of the story. But I'll come back to this application. which is very limited in scope. It's really just to a request for more flexibility to our operating hours during the mountain bike season. Most, if not all of the conversation of this hearing, I think there was like 2 sentences about the actual application. All of the conversation has been related to stormwater management, of the trails that are already in place. This application proposes no changes in construction to any of the trails. There will be no, like to your question, there's no change to anything related to stormwater. There will be no stormwater impacts from this application, no environmental impacts at all. A&R, like I said there's no impacts, they have no comments. There was a complaint filed last year about this exact location with A&R that I believe has been resolved. Like I said, there were 3 site visits. There was a complaint filed this year with Act 250. That's being investigated. I would just only suggest that these concerns about stormwater are moving through their proper, channels, so to speak. Didn't mean to pun, couldn't find another word, but, we believe that we are in compliance, and we in fact believe that we have gone above and beyond with hiring an engineer and, implementing many of those changes voluntarily without any violations. But if we're not, it will come out in this process, and we will then make any additional changes that we're told to. We're not unwilling to comply. We believe we are fully and more than compliant. And so, I would just sort of encourage everybody to reflect on this actual application, which is extremely limited in scope, and proposes no changes to anything that will impact stormwater at all. And that's it.
They're limited in scope. I mean, I'd be interested to understand like what the actual like maintenance expectations are, et cetera. I mean, that may well be part of, the issue at the end. I will say this, like, I hear what you're saying, Lindsay, like, I get it, you just want to operate, but like, I mean, from my view, like, if everything's not operating appropriately, which you may think it is, maybe I don't, right? But it is relative then, the operation.
Yeah, last comment.
I'll just go through some of the things you said. When it comes to the DRB review, I was not employed at all. DRB just first came around. The initial zoning administrator didn't think we had jurisdiction, just like a parking lot or something being built, and that wasn't the case. But I think that, anyway, it's kind of a moot point. It's over now. Looking at some of those conditions that were recommended, moving that ditch to the upper side would probably be blasting. Which again, we're pushing water where it doesn't want to go, you're blasting. Lining a ditch with an impervious liner, that's something we typically don't do unless there's contamination or something we're worried about. So it seems also unnecessary. Again, when you hear the word berm, think diversion. And that's essentially what this is, around the property. Where more water, again, should be going to it. So essentially, they're thinking more water is diverted to the property, more water is being diverted around.
Well, Steve,
I'm talking, please, let me talk for a long time. Please let me talk. I'm trying to get through this very thing. Adding riprap to where they currently have enough diversion will probably decrease capacity. It's a flat section, but there's areas that maybe go, and then, yeah, I mean, basically what Lindsay said too, like down, everyone thinks it's property lines are something water cares about. It doesn't. This is all water that's gonna flow where downhill. And anything we do to obstruct that is a man-made, curse essentially. And that's essentially what's happening. And, you know, whether it goes to their property or somebody else's, there's an impact. And the question here is whether they're making it worse or not. They take a lot of steps to undo things that were done that seem to be making it worse, and plus that naturalizing thing, taking out some of the restrictions, all this other. So I mean, that's all I want to say. Try to quickly go through.
Well, I mean, if you're altering things that make this water situation.
You've altered by creating-
I feel like that's things that's not, right? We have no control over that, that's on your property.
And the other thing that I just want to say one last thing, about the impervious surface. There's the conduits where all this kind of feeds into. Those conduits are owned by individuals. They have an impervious surface in them with riprap. It's pervious.
They're not.
Well, we don't have anything.
I think we understand the areas of disagreement.
Yes.
And then, just real quick, the storm that just happened, that 3 inches in June. So that's about a 2-year storm, based on the current 24-hour, that if you're designing things, it's supposed to. Technically happen every 2 years, these are all frequency things. What we had last year was somewhere between a 200 and 500 year storm, the July 10th storm. But, and so, it's a 200 to 500 years frequency.
We had 3 of them on the mountain this year.
We didn't have 2, 3, 500.
No, we had 3 that were above 3 elevations.
And there was no damage to it. That was before, that was
I think we'll have an opportunity to supplement this in your other responses. Caitlin, do you think we have anything else we need to do? Okay.
Steve, you've never been on the property. I'm like.
Not once,
you're-
never.
you're an engineer and you're
What we will do now
saying
is,
that it's a great
Megan.
idea to be on
could
the
I
property.
please come to order? Please come to order. As I said earlier, we will recess now. And when we have received everything that we're going to ask you to send, we will start deliberating. And we will then adjourn when we issue our decision. So stay tuned for the hearing recess order. It'll have some deadlines in it for responses and responses to responses. We understand this is a tough one for everyone, probably a tough one for us as well. And we're going to dig deep on this and figure it out. And unless my colleague has anything else, we will stand in recess. Thank you.
Thank you.